The Amato family lived in the small town of Chuluata, Florida, with a population of just 2,500 people. They resided in a spacious house situated on a plot of land slightly over 1 hectare. The heads of the family were Chad and Margaret Amato, who got married in 1986. At that time, Margaret already had a 3-year-old son, Jason, from a previous marriage. Chad adopted the boy and raised him as his own. The couple was very close. Later, they had 2 more sons together, Cody in 1987 and Grant in 1989. 59-year-old Chad worked as a pharmacist his entire life and was also passionate about computers, calling himself a self-taught computer guru. His 61-year-old wife, Margaret, held the position of senior operations manager at a large company. The woman loved horses and devoted her free time to rescuing and rehabilitating racehorses. The Amato family was financially well off. The parents had prestigious jobs, and the children never knew any need from an early age. Overall, the family seemed quite happy and prosperous. Grant Amato was the youngest of Chad and Margaret's 3 sons. He grew up as a rather shy and clumsy child, finding it difficult to make friends. In fact, his only friend was his older brother Cody, with whom Grant had a very close relationship. They went to school together, played sports together, and even chose the same profession. Both became nurse anesthetists. However, in June 2018, when Grant was 29 years old, problems began in his life. He worked at a hospital from which he was fired after being caught stealing 8 vials of a potent painkiller. Grant claimed that he took the medications for patients to whom doctors prescribed an insufficient dose, but the management did not believe this and brought charges against him. Although the charges were later dropped for lack of evidence, Grant lost his job. This event greatly affected the young man's mental state. He became a recluse, withdrew into himself, and spent all his time at home. Grant fell into depression, slept all day, and played video games at night. The situation was exacerbated by the fact that he had no money at all. His parents tried to support their son, gave him money to live on, but in return asked him to find a job. These requests only irritated Grant and led to quarrels. Meanwhile, Grant found solace in communicating on the internet. He spent a lot of time on adult sites, especially those where he could chat with webcam models. And it was there that he met the girl who changed his life. She turned out to be a Bulgarian webcam model who called herself Sylvie. Grant fell in love with her at first sight. But it was not a bright and joyful feeling, but more like a morbid obsession. Amato sought to communicate with Sylvie as much as possible. He was willing to pay any amount of money just to see her and talk to her. At first, Grant spent several $100s a day on private chats with the girl. Then the sums increased to thousands of dollars. He also bought and sent Sylvie expensive lingerie and sex toys, which she was supposed to wear during their communication. Grant believed that he and Sylvie had a real relationship. He told her that he lived in a luxurious house, drove a BMW, and was a successful professional gamer who earned huge amounts of money. Of course, the girl believed this after all. Grant sent her huge sums, up to $10,000 at a time. In reality, almost all this money belonged to Grant's parents and brother. At first, he spent their cash savings which relatives gave him, hoping to support him. When the money ran out, Grant began to steal. He stole his father's and brother's credit cards and used them to pay for communication with Sylvie. In total, Amato spent about $200,000 on this over the course of several months. Communicating with the webcam model became a real addiction for Grant. He could not do without daily conversations with her and was ready to do anything to pay for them. For the sake of this, he even stole the credit card of Cody's friend Jericho when the 3 of them were vacationing in Japan. While his friends were having fun, Grant sat in the hotel in front of the computer, spending Jericho's money on conversations with Sylvie. At the end of 2018, Grant's parents became curious about the constant debiting of funds from their cards. The son lied to them, saying that he was allegedly trying very hard to promote his channel on Twitch and become a successful professional gamer. But in reality, he was spending this money on communicating with the webcam model. Chad and Margaret believed that their son had really come to his senses and was trying to start earning money. They wanted to support him and continued to give him access to their money. But after some time, they discovered that Grant was simply deceiving them and spending money not at all on developing a gamer career. In December of the same year, when Grant returned from a vacation in Japan with his brother Cody, his parents had a serious conversation with him. They informed their son that they would no longer give him money and forbade him to use their cards. Also, Chad and Margaret insisted that Grant stop communicating with Sylvie and look for a job. But Grant did not want to listen to anything. These demands from his parents infuriated him incredibly. During an argument, Chad, who had always been rather domineering and impulsive, kicked Grant out of the house. The enraged son slammed the door and fled the house in his car. Margaret was very worried about Grant's mental state and feared that he might harm himself. She called the police and reported that her 29-year-old son had run away from home and possibly intended to commit suicide. To prove her words, Margaret showed a message from Grant, who wrote to her, "I'm very tired of everything. I will deal with it in my own way." It later turned out that Grant had gone to his Aunt Donna, who lived 30 minutes away from them. The woman sheltered him for a few days until he calmed down. However, soon the aunt noticed that money began to disappear from her bank card as well over the course of a few days. Grant stole hundreds of dollars, which he again spent on communicating with Sylvie. He accessed his uncle and aunt's accounts while they were sleeping and transferred money to pay for private chats with the webcam model. When the deceived aunt called Chad, he burst into tears. The man confessed that Grant had driven him into debt for $150,000, and he did not know how to deal with it. He asked his sister not to go to the police about this, promising to return all the money stolen from her. Eventually, at the end of December 2018, Grant's father and older brothers staged an intervention for him. They gave the young man an ultimatum: either he goes to a rehab clinic for addiction treatment, or he will be deprived of financial support and permission to live in their house. Grant agreed and was sent to the clinic for a 60-day rehabilitation program, for which the family paid $15,000. While undergoing treatment, Grant was deprived of internet access and the ability to communicate with Sylvie. Meanwhile, his parents, trying to figure out what had happened to their son, began to examine his correspondence with the girl. From the text of the messages, they realized that Grant was not only spending a huge amount of money on her, but had also been lying to her all this time about who he was and what he did. To put an end to this, Grant's father contacted Sylvie and revealed the whole truth to her. He informed the girl that Grant was an unemployed 29-year-old guy who lived with his parents and stole their money to impress her. This was also reported to other men from the online community around Sylvie. Chad insistently asked the girl to stop communicating with his son when he returned home from rehab, and she allegedly promised to do so. Grant's treatment at the rehab center was supposed to last 60 days, but after just 2 weeks, he voluntarily left the clinic and returned home, assuring everyone that he had been cured of his addiction. This happened on January 5th, 2019. His parents met Grant with a serious conversation. They informed him that they were ready to allow him to live in their house, but under certain conditions. Grant had to get a job, stop stealing money, and never communicate with Sylvie again. Also, Chad and Margaret reported that from now on, they would take the computer out of his room every evening so that he could not go online at night without everyone noticing. All these rules were clearly written on a sheet of paper, which Grant was given to sign. The 30-year-old young man looked depressed, but supposedly agreed to comply with these requirements. He told his parents that he would find a job soon and stop talking to the webcam model. However, the news that his father had told Sylvie the whole truth infuriated Grant. He felt a strong resentment towards Chad and Margaret for interfering in his relationship with the girl. Despite his promises, Grant did not intend to stop communicating with Sylvie. When his parents took away his smartphone, he would ask his mother for her phone, allegedly to watch some videos on YouTube. Margaret sometimes gave her mobile phone to her son, not suspecting that he was using it to write to the webcam model on Twitter. Soon, Chad found out about this. On January 24th, another big fight took place between him and Grant. The father accused the son of violating the agreements reached and demanded that he immediately get out of the house. The enraged Grant left the house, slamming the door loudly. On the same day, January 24, 2019, Grant's older brother Cody returned from his hospital shift half an hour earlier than usual. He read a message from his parents about another fight with Grant and decided to go straight home to settle the situation. Cody, who had always been the peacemaker in the family, hoped to calm his parents down and convince them to give Grant another chance. The next morning, on January 25th, Cody's co-workers became worried when he did not show up for his shift and did not answer phone calls. This was extremely atypical for the responsible and punctual young man. The medics turned to the police and asked them to send a patrol to check on the Amato family's house. The police officers who arrived at the scene banged on the doors and windows, but no one answered. Looking inside, they did not notice any signs of robbery or break-in, but the house was suspiciously quiet. After coordination with the leadership, the patrol officers broke down the door and entered the house. At that moment, a horrific sight awaited them. 59-year-old Chad Amato was lying in a pool of blood on the kitchen floor. He had been shot twice in the back of the head when he had apparently just returned from work and was preparing dinner. In the next room, in a chair in front of the computer, sat 61-year-old Margaret Amato, shot in the temple. A half-empty glass of white wine stood nearby. 31-year-old Cody was found dead on the threshold between the garage and the room. He had been killed with a shot to the forehead and was lying in a fetal position in a pool of his own blood. An examination of the crime scene showed no signs of struggle or robbery. All the family's valuables remained untouched. It seemed that the killer had caught his victims by surprise and dealt with them one by one. Some details, such as the bloody trail on the floor next to Chad's body, indicated that he had tried to escape or get to the phone after the first shot, but the killer had caught up with him and finished him off. In the absence of signs of an outsider's intrusion into the house, the main suspect for the police immediately became Grant Amato, who was not among the killed family members. The police declared Grant wanted. Soon his car was spotted parked near one of the hotels in Orange County, a 30-minute drive from the house. When the operatives burst into the room, they saw Grant lying on the floor in medical clothing. He did not resist arrest. During a search of Grant's room, credit cards of his deceased father and brother were found, as well as a foreign passport, which indicated the suspect's intention to flee the country. During interrogation, Grant behaved surprisingly calmly. He told the police about his tense relationship with his domineering father, his addiction to communicating with the webcam model, and his relative's prohibition on seeing his beloved girl. But at the same time, he never once inquired about the condition of his relatives. Only when investigators showed him pictures from the crime scene did Grant burst into tears. He continued to deny his involvement in the murder of his parents and brother. However, his testimony regarding the events of January 24th turned out to be rather contradictory and did not stand up to any criticism. The investigation into this triple murder lasted several months. Investigators managed to gather a number of pieces of evidence that testified against Grant Amato. Forensic experts established that the bodies of the deceased had been specially moved to stage a picture of a murder-suicide by one of the family members. A study of the victim's phones showed that after killing his father, Grant sent messages from his smartphone to Cody to lure his brother home for a massacre. A digital analyst reconstructed the chronology of events on the fatal evening. According to his conclusions, Grant first shot his mother while she was working at the computer. Then he lay in wait for his father and shot him as soon as he returned from work. After dealing with his parents, Grant waited in ambush for Cody for several hours. When his brother entered the house, the killer sent him to the next world with a shot to the forehead. The investigation established that after the triple murder, Grant copied his correspondence with Sylvie onto a flash drive, and around midnight, using the fingerprint of his dead father, he entered his banking account and transferred money from there to his credit card. He later used these funds to renew his premium subscription on the site where his beloved webcam model worked. Such behavior resembled the actions of a true sociopath. In addition, An 8-page manifesto text was found on Grant's laptop, which he had written shortly before the crime. In it, the killer accused his parents of interfering with his relationship with Sylvie, to whom he was going to confess his love. Grant did not hide his hatred for his relatives, calling his father a controlling tyrant who deserved punishment. On July 23, 2019, the trial of Grant Amato, who was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, began in the Seminole County Court. Prosecutors emphasized that the cold-blooded shooting of his parents and brother was a carefully planned revenge by the young man who was forbidden to communicate with the webcam model. The prosecution presented a number of pieces of evidence of Grant's guilt. In particular, his 8-page message in which he confessed his hatred for his family. Witnesses spoke about the young man's addiction to communicating with Sylvie, on which he spent insane amounts of money. Cody's co-worker recounted how that day his friend had suddenly left work after receiving a message from his father. Investigators demonstrated how Grant used the bank card of his already dead father to pay for premium access to the webcam model. In turn, Grant's lawyers built their defense on the absence of direct evidence of his guilt. They noted that no traces of Grant's DNA or fingerprints were found at the crime scene. The gun with which the members of the Amato family were shot was also not found. According to the defense, Grant could have written his manifesto in a state of passion, without any real intention of killing his relatives. The trial lasted almost 3 weeks. During this time, several dozen people testified in the courtroom: relatives, friends, colleagues of the deceased, as well as police officers and forensic experts. The prosecution insisted on life imprisonment for Grant Amato, while the defense asked for leniency, citing his lack of a criminal record. On August 12, 2019, the jury found 30-year-old Grant Amato guilty on all counts, 3 counts of first-degree premeditated murder. Judge Jessica Rexidler announced the sentence to the defendant: 3 life sentences to be served concurrently, without the possibility of parole. Mr. Amato, this was a deliberate and premeditated act on your part. You took the lives of 3 people who loved you the most because of your own obsession. Your actions were not the result of some momentary hatred. It was a planned revenge against those who, in your opinion, stood in the way of your unhealthy desires and fantasies. And the court believes that you pose too great a threat to society to ever be released, the judge stated. After hearing the verdict, Grant Amato showed no emotion. His face remained as impassive as it had been throughout the entire trial. Moreover, during his last words, the defendant did not mention his deceased parents and brother even once. Instead, he continued to talk about his obsession with the webcam model Sylvie, and that one day they would still be together. With this, the chilling story of the Amato family came to its tragic finale. Grant ended up behind bars, but not because of his addiction to the internet and webcam models. He went to prison for the brutal murder of his closest people, his father, mother, and brother. And judging by his last words in the courtroom, even life imprisonment did not make him repent and apologize for what he had done. Hello, dear friends. Welcome to Crime Story Diaries. Today we'll be examining a terrifying case, so I invite you to watch the video. Don't forget to leave your comments and likes. On a quiet night of July 31st, 2022, the small town of Strongsville, Ohio, witnessed a tragedy that would forever change the lives of many people. That night, no one could have predicted that a regular ride of 3 young individuals would turn into a fatal event that would claim the lives of 2 of them and permanently shatter the fate of the 3rd. Mackenzie Sherilla, a 17-year-old girl, got behind the wheel of her 2018 Toyota Camry. Next to her was her boyfriend, 20-year-old Dominic Russo, and in the back seat was their mutual friend, 19-year-old Davian Flanagan. They were returning from a party, full of plans for the future and the joy of life. None of them knew that this ride would be the last for the 2 young men. A quiet street, a night in the city, 3 friends in a car. It seemed like an ordinary scene for a summer night. But in the air, there was already an elusive premonition of trouble, which perhaps the passengers of the vehicle could feel but could not or did not want to acknowledge. This night would forever alter the lives not only of the participants of the ride, but also their families, friends, and the entire community of Strongsville. Mackenzie Sherilla was born in 2004 to Natalie Sherilla and John Stephen in Strongsville, Ohio. She was the 3rd child in the family, where parents tried to provide their children with everything necessary for a happy childhood. From an early age, Mackenzie was the family favorite. Parents often forgave her various pranks and mischief, trying to raise their daughter in an atmosphere of love and care. However, such excessive indulgence had its negative consequences. Even in childhood, Mackenzie began to show signs of a difficult character. She got used to her parents always fulfilling her demands, and gradually, she developed a sense of impunity. The girl became increasingly demanding and selfish, not considering the feelings and desires of others. As Mackenzie grew older, her character became more and more complicated. She easily lost her temper, behaved arrogantly and impatiently, often argued, and could even get into fights. Mackenzie disregarded the opinions of others, believing that her word should always be the last. At school, Mackenzie often got into trouble. Together with her friends, she engaged in vandalism, organized pogroms, participated in fights, and sometimes even stole. Several times, the girl came to the attention of the police, but usually, everything was limited to warnings and educational talks. In high school, Mackenzie began experimenting with alcohol and drugs. She often posted provocative photos on social media where she was smoking or drinking alcohol, accompanied by equally provocative comments. Her parents seemed not to notice or did not want to notice the obvious problem, attributing everything to adolescence. Dominic Russo was born on September 24, 2001, in Strongsville, Ohio, to Christina and Frank Russo. He was the 4th of 7 children in the family. Despite the large number of children, the parents tried to give attention to each of them, raising them with love and care. From an early age, Dominic showed diverse talents and interests. He did well in school, actively participated in sports, and tried to lead a healthy lifestyle. Dominic dreamed of a career in the music industry and, at a young age, began writing and performing his own songs. He entered a local university, specializing in performing arts producer, striving to fulfill his dream of becoming a famous music producer. Dominic and Mackenzie first met when the girl was in her senior year of high school. It happened at one of the parties in the company of mutual friends. Despite the difference in age and character, the young people felt a mutual attraction. Dominic was attracted to Mackenzie by her intelligence, good manners, and interesting conversations. Mackenzie, in turn, was enchanted by Dominic's bright appearance and ability to make an impression. In the fall of 2021, Mackenzie and Dominic started dating. The first months of their relationship were filled with romance and mutual admiration. They spent a lot of time together, appearing everywhere holding hands and openly demonstrating their tender feelings. The young couple introduced each other to their parents, who reacted differently to this union. Over time, Dominic began to notice oddities in his girlfriend's behavior. Her audacious antics and desire for everyone around her to do only what she wanted did not cause him much concern at first. He attributed everything to her young age and desire to attract attention. Gradually, the relationship between Mackenzie and Dominic became increasingly tense. Mackenzie demanded complete submission to her desires from her boyfriend. If he disagreed with her on something, she made scenes, tantrums, and behaved like a spoiled child. In public, Mackenzie still tried to control herself, but when alone with Dominic, she unleashed a storm of emotions on him, sometimes even throwing punches. When Mackenzie's behavior became completely unbearable, Dominic decided to end this toxic relationship. He suggested taking a break and sorting out their feelings. However, Mackenzie did not accept this decision. She made a public scene in front of their mutual friends, screaming, threatening Dominic that she would kill him if he left her, threatening to burn down his house and wreck his car. These actions only strengthened Dominic's confidence in the correctness of his decision to break up. Davian Flanagan, a 19-year-old friend of Dominic and Mackenzie, had a difficult childhood. He was adopted along with his two younger siblings from foster care when they were little. Despite the challenging circumstances, Davian maintained his natural kindness and positive attitude towards life. Davian and Dominic became close friends. They shared many common interests and values. When Dominic started dating Mackenzie, Davian also got to know her. He became part of their shared circle of friends, often spending time together with the couple. Despite his complicated past, Davian had big plans for the future. He dreamed of entering a barber school and eventually opening his own salon in the city. Davian was known as an incorrigible dreamer with a heart of gold, always ready to help his friends, even in the middle of the night. On July 30th, 2022, Mackenzie suggested to Dominic that they go to a party organized by their mutual friends. It was supposed to be an opportunity to have fun and show everyone that they were together again. Dominic agreed, still not sensing any threat from Mackenzie. At the party, the couple looked happy. They held hands, openly displayed their affection, and seemed like a harmonious pair. Friends were genuinely pleased with their reunion, noting that they looked great together. Throughout the evening, the young people had fun, danced, and consumed alcohol. Mackenzie, moreover, secretly took a dose of drugs, as she later explained, for courage. The party lasted until morning, and no one suspected what a tragedy would soon occur. Around 5 o'clock in the morning on July 31st, Mackenzie and Dominic decided to go home. At that moment, Davian approached them and asked for a ride. Despite the fact that this was not part of Mackenzie's plans, she agreed, not wanting to arouse suspicion. The three friends got into the 2018 Toyota Camry, Mackenzie behind the wheel, Dominic in the passenger seat and Davian in the back. Leaving the party venue, Mackenzie initially drove the car calmly, observing the traffic rules. On the main street, she drove slowly, not exceeding the speed limit and trying not to attract attention. At a traffic light, she stopped, although the road was empty. After the traffic light turned green, Mackenzie abruptly accelerated and turned onto a poorly lit secondary road leading to an industrial zone. The vehicle's speed rapidly increased, reaching over 100 miles per hour. According to the car's black box data, Mackenzie pressed the gas pedal to the floor and made no attempt to brake. The car crashed into a brick wall of a building in the industrial zone of Strongsville at an enormous speed. The impact was so severe that the vehicle was completely wrecked. Dominic Russo and Davian Flanagan, who were not wearing seatbelts, died on the spot from their injuries. Mackenzie, who was the only one wearing a seatbelt, survived the crash. She was found unconscious, trapped in the driver's seat. Her fuzzy Prada slipper was stuck on the gas pedal. Rescuers pulled her from the mangled car and urgently transported her to the hospital. The news of the tragic deaths of Dominic and Davian came as a shock to their families and friends. Dominic's parents, brothers, and sisters were devastated by the loss. Davian's adoptive family also could not believe what had happened. The young men's friends and acquaintances gathered together to support each other and honor the memory of those who died. The tragedy shook the entire town of Strongsville. Local residents were shocked by what had occurred. Many knew Dominic and Davian personally or through their families. the community united to support the relatives of the deceased and express their condolences. Mackenzie's behavior after the accident caused surprise and outrage in many. After being discharged from the hospital, she quickly returned to her usual way of life. Already in September, she attended a concert of her favorite band in a neighboring city, appearing there in a wheelchair, but with bright makeup and provocative clothing. She continued to actively use social networks, posting selfies with friends and videos from parties. Friends and acquaintances of Dominic and Davian were shocked by Mackenzie's behavior. They could not understand how she could have fun and live her usual life after what had happened. Many believed that her behavior indicated a lack of remorse and indifference to the deaths of close people. The investigation began immediately after the tragedy. The police thoroughly examined the scene of the accident, collecting all possible evidence. Drugs and digital scales were found in Mackenzie's pockets, indicating possible use of prohibited substances before the trip. Investigators managed to obtain footage from surveillance cameras that captured part of the car's route before the accident. The video showed that Mackenzie initially drove the car normally, observing traffic rules, but then suddenly turned onto a road leading to an industrial zone and sharply increased her speed. During the investigation, friends and acquaintances of Mackenzie and Dominic were questioned. Many spoke about the couple's complicated and toxic relationship. One witness reported hearing Mackenzie threaten to kill Dominic in a car crash 2 weeks before the tragedy. Analysis of the car's black box showed that Mackenzie pressed the gas pedal to the floor and made no attempt to brake before the collision. This, along with other evidence, led investigators to conclude that the accident might not have been accidental, but an intentional action on Mackenzie's part. On November 4, 2022, Mackenzie was taken into custody. Her lawyers chose a line of defense, claiming that the accident was a tragic misfortune. They insisted that Mackenzie had no intention of killing anyone and was herself a victim of circumstances. The prosecution presented evidence to the court that, in their opinion, indicated the intentional nature of Mackenzie's actions. They referred to the black box data, video from surveillance cameras, as well as testimony about Mackenzie's previous threats against Dominic. Relatives and friends of Dominic and Davian testified in court. They spoke about the character of the boys, their dreams and plans for the future, which the tragedy had cut short. These emotional testimonies made a strong impression on everyone present in the courtroom. Experts presented the court with the results of Mackenzie's blood analysis, which showed the presence of alcohol and drugs above the permitted level. Technical data on the condition of the car and the nature of the accident were also presented, confirming the version of intentional actions by the driver. In their closing statements, Mackenzie's lawyers insisted that she had no intention of killing anyone and deeply regretted what had happened. The prosecution, on the other hand, argued that Mackenzie's actions were deliberate and planned and demanded the maximum punishment. During the trial, Mackenzie displayed various emotions. Sometimes she cried, looking depressed and confused. At other moments, she seemed calm and even indifferent. The court and those present tried to understand whether these emotions were sincere or an attempt to evoke sympathy. In her final words, Mackenzie addressed the families of Dominic and Davian, expressing deep regret for what had happened. She claimed that she would never have done it intentionally and that Dominic was the love of her life. Mackenzie also said that she would like to remember the details of that trip, but her memory had erased those recollections. On August 21, 2023, the judge announced the verdict. Mackenzie Shirilla was found guilty on all 12 counts of the indictment, including murder, aggravated vehicular homicide, and possession of controlled substances. The judge emphasized that the video clearly demonstrated the goals and intentions of the defendant, and that her actions were not accidental, but intentional and carefully planned. When the judge announced the sentence, Mackenzie cried and looked shocked. Her mother, Natalie Shirilla, was also stunned by the court's decision and continued to insist on her daughter's innocence. The families of Dominic and Davian expressed mixed feelings. On the one hand, they felt some relief that justice had prevailed. On the other hand, They understood that it would not bring back their lost loved ones. This tragic story became a vivid example of how a dangerous combination of youth, unstable emotions, and drugs can lead to catastrophic consequences. It emphasizes the importance of a responsible attitude towards one's actions and awareness of their possible consequences. The relationship between Mackenzie and Dominic was a prime example of a toxic relationship. This story demonstrates how important it is to recognize the signs of unhealthy relationships in time and have the courage to end them before they lead to tragedy. This tragedy also highlights the importance of responsible driving. It reminds us that a car can become a deadly weapon in the hands of an irresponsible driver, especially under the influence of alcohol or drugs. The case of Mackenzie raises important questions about juvenile delinquency and ways to prevent it. It emphasizes the need for early detection of problematic behavior and the provision of appropriate assistance to adolescents and their families. This story also makes us think about the complex issue of the balance between justice and mercy in the judicial system, especially when it comes to young offenders. It raises questions about how society can simultaneously ensure justice for victims and give a chance for rehabilitation to those who have committed a crime. Mackenzie Shirilla was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. This means that she will be able to apply for parole at the age of 34. Time will tell whether Mackenzie will use this period to rethink her actions and truly repent, whether she will be able to change and become a better person. The memory of Dominic Russo and Davian Flanagan continues to live on in the hearts of their loved ones and friends. The families and friends of the deceased have organized several charity events in their honor to preserve the memory of the young men and their dreams. At the university where Dominic studied, a scholarship was established in his name for students in the music field. For the families of Dominic and Davian, the healing process has been long and difficult. They are trying to find the strength to move on while keeping the memory of their sons alive. Some family members have become active participants in community organizations that fight against drunk driving and advocate for road safety. The tragedy has deeply affected the community of Strongsville. Local authorities and educational institutions have initiated a number of programs aimed at preventing juvenile delinquency and combating drug use among young people. Additional lessons on road safety and responsible driving have been introduced in schools. This tragic story has become a painful lesson for many. It reminds us of the importance of a responsible attitude towards our actions, the danger of toxic relationships, and the detrimental influence of drugs. It also emphasizes how fragile human life can be and how quickly reckless decisions can lead to irreparable consequences. The case of Mackenzie Shirilla remains a subject of discussion and reflection. It poses complex questions to society about justice, responsibility, and the possibility of rehabilitation. Regardless of one's personal attitude towards this case, it serves as a powerful reminder of the value of every human life and the importance of conscious choice in each of our actions. Traditionally, thank you for watching, and remind you that it would be great if you support the video by liking and subscribing to the channel. Hello dear friends, welcome to Crime Story Diaries. Today we'll be examining a terrifying case, so I invite you to watch the video. Don't forget to leave your comments and likes. Emily Longley was born on February 22, 1994 in London, the capital of Great Britain, into the loving family of Mark and Caroline Longley. She was their first child. Mark, who was 26 years old at the time, found it difficult to get used to fatherhood, but when he first held his newborn daughter in his arms, he felt a special connection with her. Emily grew up to be a kind, cheerful girl with a charming smile. When Emily was 1.5 years old, doctors diagnosed her with serious illnesses, osteoporosis, asthma, eczema, and food allergies to many products. When Emily was 2 years old, a younger daughter, Hannah, joined the family, with whom Emily developed a very close relationship. She's adored each other and brought joy to their parents. Despite frequent illnesses, Emily took care of her younger sister. She's grew up in an atmosphere of unconditional parental love. In 2003, when Emily was 9 and Hannah was 7 years old, the family made the difficult decision to move from their hometown of Bournemouth to Auckland, the largest city in New Zealand. The main reason was the doctor's advice to change the climate for Emily's health. The family missed their home and loved ones who remained in England, but their daughter's health was the top priority. In New Zealand, she's continued to grow up in an atmosphere of warmth and care. Emily attended a prestigious private school. Despite some problems with classmates, life went on as usual. At the end of 2010, at the age of 16, Emily decided to return to England to continue her education in college. She dreamed of becoming a model and later opening her own business. She had a bright appearance and attracted a lot of attention. Her parents did not want to let Emily go, but knowing her character, they agreed. She settled in the house of her grandparents, Mark's parents, in Bournemouth. Emily enrolled in college, started working part-time at the Topshop clothing store, and participated in advertising photo shoots. In December 2010, at one of the parties, she met 19-year-old Elliot Turner. Elliot was the only son of a successful hereditary jeweler. He worked in his father's jewelry store in Bournemouth and lived in the family home in the affluent Queen's Park area. Elliot was a member of the well-known company of wealthy young people called The Firm, who actively spent time in local bars and clubs in Bournemouth and Poole. His life revolved around parties, alcohol, expensive things, and girls. Elliot constantly boasted about his Mini Cooper, a gift from his grandmother. Despite his obsession with women, he genuinely fell for Emily, who perfectly complemented his image of a successful person. A relationship quickly developed between the young people. Elliot was very devoted to his girlfriend, who was engaged in modeling and attracted the attention of other men. But at the same time, he began to exhibit extraordinary jealousy towards Emily. Within just 4 months, their romance turned into continuous quarrels and mutual recriminations. As the relationship developed, Elliot increasingly demonstrated his controlling behavior. If he didn't like Emily's clothes, he accused her of dressing like a whore. Elliot hacked She's Facebook account to monitor her activities and correspondence. He could also show up unannounced where Emily was. Elliot intimidated She using his strength and anger. Emily once even wrote him a note with the following words: "Stop being so aggressive. You constantly make me afraid because you are so scary." However, after each incident, Elliot sincerely apologized, promised to change, and everything repeated again. Eventually, the threats moved from words to real actions. Elliot grabbed Emily by the throat and hit her in public several times. At the same time, he blamed She for being the cause of his uncontrollable outbursts of anger. In April 2011, Emily went to New Zealand to visit her family, whom she had not seen for about 6 months. Her father met her at the airport, and she hugged him tightly, saying that she had missed him very much. Emily had a close, trusting relationship with her dad, who loved her dearly. The next day, the whole family went to Emily's favorite pizzeria. She told her parents that in addition to studying at college, she was engaged in modeling and had met wonderful friends. She also mentioned her boyfriend, 20-year-old Elliot Turner, whom she had been dating for only a few months. Emily believed that she was still too young for a serious relationship, so she said, "I think I'm going to end it when I get back." Emily spent the next few weeks hanging out with friends and family. She had a great time. No one suspected that they would soon lose her. When boarding began for Emily's flight, it was hard for her to say goodbye to her family. However, she promised to return in 5 months to watch the matches of the Rugby World Cup, which was set to begin on September 9th. In correspondence with her father a few days later, Emily reported breaking up with Elliot, but did not go into details. Turner began to behave strangely after seeing photos of Emily from New Zealand, which she posted on social media. There were guys in these pictures, and it infuriated the jealous Elliot. On May 6, 2011, Emily was hanging out with friends at one of the entertainment venues. Surveillance cameras recorded how she came to the nightclub with her girlfriends. That evening, Turner read Emily's messages on Facebook and found out that she had been seeing another man. This enraged him. He came to the club and started arguing with Emily. The whole story ended with she throwing her drink in his face. Elliot crudely insulted Emily and threatened violence. He didn't like her revealing outfit. He dismissed the fact that she had broken up with him and was not going to let her go. Elliot ruined her evening, so she decided to leave, but her ex-boyfriend caught up with her. His friends heard him say, "I'm going to kill her. I'm going to go to prison for it and still be a millionaire. I would do 10 years. It wouldn't bother me." Turner caught up with Emily and somehow persuaded her to go to his house, saying he wanted to talk in a calmer atmosphere. Perhaps she agreed because she knew that Elliot lived with his parents and hoped that in their presence he would behave more restrainedly. Neighbors saw the couple enter the house. The following morning, May 7th, around 9:45, Elliot's mother, Anita Turner, called the emergency services and reported that there was a girl in her son's bed who was not waking up. It was Emily Longley. Anita spoke quite calmly. The woman said that she tried to feel for a pulse but failed. According to her, she was not breathing, and her skin had turned a bluish color. Before the ambulance arrived, Anita listened to the operator's instructions on how to help Emily. Unfortunately, when the medics arrived, they could only pronounce she dead. Neighbors saw Turner sitting in the ambulance with his head in his hands after Emily's death. Elliot Turner was immediately arrested, but later released on bail pending the end of the investigation. The investigation into the tragic death of Emily Longley began. The younger Turner, tormented by guilt, wrote a confession, but his parents, determined not to lose their only son, deliberately concealed crucial evidence, delaying the investigation. 51-year-old Anita Turner and 53-year-old Lee Turner took the jacket their son was wearing on the night of the incident out of the house, retrieved the confession letter from the pocket, and doused it with bleach to destroy this important evidence. During the investigation, a decision was made to secretly install listening devices in the spacious Turner family home. From May 18th to June 14th, the police made a series of recordings of conversations in their home. Having obtained evidence of how the family discussed fabricating evidence and feared lying to the police, law enforcement officers seized the Turners' home computers to search for additional information, and they found it. A check of the web browser history revealed search queries on the topic of death by strangulation and how to avoid being charged with murder. In July, all 3 family members were arrested and charged with involvement in the incident and deliberately concealing evidence. The police launched an investigation immediately after the tragic incident. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away from England, in New Zealand, Emily's father Mark woke up in the morning and saw many missed calls and messages from his ex-wife Caroline and younger daughter Hannah. He listened to Hannah's voice messages, who through tears asked him to call back urgently. At some point, in the background, Mark heard Caroline scream, repeating one phrase, "Emily is dead." Mark couldn't believe it. He was in a state of shock. The man immediately called his mother in England, and she confirmed the terrible news. It was not a dream. Mark called the police. The officers informed him that his daughter had died in her sleep. The father immediately realized that something terrible had happened. The police gathered certain evidence, but it was unclear what exactly had happened to Emily. Investigators had to wait for the autopsy results. Elliot Turner's parents, Anita and Lee, told investigators that they were at home all night and did not hear anything suspicious. Elliot himself publicly mourned Emily by posting their photos together on his Facebook page. Initially, the police did not have enough evidence to refute Turner's and his parents' version that Emily had mysteriously died in her sleep. But later, investigators found out that a few days before her death, she had posted a strange message on her Facebook page. "I have a stalker." Emily wrote that some stranger was calling her, knowing everything about her and constantly inviting her on a date. At the same time, the police managed to find out that before her death, Emily had quarreled with Elliot Turner in front of other nightclub visitors. After questioning Turner's friends, investigators learned that he tried to control Emily's every move, that he found out about her meeting with another man, and most importantly, that Elliot had threatened to take She's life many times. But his friends did not attach much importance to this, believing that these were just words that Turner used to reinforce his gangster image. The autopsy did not provide the exact cause of Emily's death. However, experts noted that it could have been strangulation. One of them said, "The physical evidence is fully consistent with pressure being applied to the neck." Investigators believe that someone from the Turner family could have been involved in Emily's death, so they decided to install listening devices in their home. The police hoped to find out if they were hiding something, and not for nothing. At the trial in May 2012, Elliot Turner's lawyer claimed that their client acted in self-defense. Elliot himself stated that the quarrel in his bedroom escalated into a fight, and he had to grab Emily by the neck. He said that he did not strangle her but simply found her dead in his bed the next morning. On the second day of the trial, Turner said that he was disgusted by his actions that night. Allegedly, after discovering Emily dead, he wrote a letter to his mother saying how ashamed he was and that he was going to Spain. It can be assumed that on the day of Emily's death, Elliot was going to leave the country but changed his mind for some reason. When the police arrived at the Turners' house after the ambulance call, they saw packed suitcases. Elliot's passport was in his pocket. He admitted in court that he had threatened Emily and was upset and deceived the evening before her death when he saw fake emails on her phone allegedly saying that he had smashed her face against a table. Describing their fight before she's death, Elliot recalled that Emily began hitting him with her hands and feet. He tried to calm her down before giving up and throwing her 20 pounds for a taxi. The lawyer asked Elliot why he grabbed Emily by the throat. Turner replied, "To make her stop going crazy. I didn't know what to do. My right hand touched her neck." When asked how hard he squeezed her neck, Elliot said, "I wouldn't say very hard, but quite firmly. I grabbed her and pushed her onto the bed. I pressed on her neck when she was lying down." He added that he held her like that for about 5 to 6 seconds, then let go and ran out of the room. When asked if he wanted to kill Emily, Turner replied, "No." According to him, he thought that Emily had just fallen asleep. During cross-examination, Anita Turner was asked if she thought Emily had ruined her son's life. After a 6-second pause, Anita replied, "No." In the recordings, Lee is heard asking Anita if they did the right thing. "We did the right thing," Anita says in response. Both 51-year-old Anita Turner and 54-year-old Lee Turner were found guilty of perverting the course of justice and sentenced to 27 months in prison each. The court portrayed Elliot Turner as a spoiled rich boy whose parents wanted to help him avoid punishment. Described by his father as wild, Elliot was able to freely come and go from his parents' house through a separate entrance in the garage so as not to disturb them. It was in his room, which had its own minibar, that he strangled Emily on his bed. The main motive for the crime was jealousy. The court heard the testimony of Luke Ashford, who spent the night with Emily. As already mentioned, Elliot Turner found out about this. Even while in custody, he boasted that the jury would believe his twisted story that Emily had attacked him, and he acted in self-defense when he strangled her in a fit of jealousy. In letters from his prison cell to his friends, Turner wrote that he would soon be driving a new Range Rover and moving to Spain. He planned to sell the rights to his story and live a fashionable life. However, the jury quickly shattered his illusions when they found him guilty. On May 22, 2012, the court sentenced Elliot Turner to life imprisonment with the right to parole no earlier than 16 years. Announcing the verdict, Mrs. Justice Dobbs characterized Turner as an extremely arrogant person. She said, "You could put aside thoughts of champagne, Bentleys, and girls and focus on the reason why you are serving a life sentence." The judge also sentenced Turner to 9 months in prison to be served concurrently for perverting the course of justice. After the verdicts were announced, Emily's father, Mark, broke down while talking about the case. Tears were in his eyes. His ex-wife Caroline and daughter Hannah supported him. "What we have heard over these 5 weeks has shocked and outraged us. The fact that such an evil person as Turner could treat a gentle and loving girl like Emily so cruelly is beyond belief. She came halfway around the world to build a better life, and Turner decided to take it away." Mark recalled that there was a lot of talk about Turner's boasting, But no one took his threats seriously until it was too late. Even his mother did not take him seriously when he wrote to her that he was going to break Emily's neck. Perhaps if someone had taken his threats seriously, Emily would be with us today. I hope Turner suffers every day in prison for what he did. In October 2020, the press reported that cellmates had beaten Elliot Turner in prison for what he had done. This happened after he hung photos of Emily in his cell and boasted that he was receiving letters from female fans. Some of his cellmates attacked him after he said he would soon return to a life full of champagne, Bentleys, and birds. In 5 years, Turner will have the right to apply for early release from prison. One can only hope that common sense will prevail, and the parole board will make the right decision regarding a person who still does not repent for his actions. Losing a beloved daughter became an unbearable ordeal for Emily's parents. Mark told the Herald newspaper how hard it was for him to lose his daughter. That's the thing about death. It's awful. It doesn't matter if it's your child, your partner, or your 99-year-old grandmother. It's awful. When a person is here today and not here tomorrow, it's not something we can easily deal with. All anniversaries are hard. Birthdays are hard. Christmas is hard. Easter is also tough because it was the last time I really spent time with her. He said that the hardest part was that he would never see the woman she could have become. I missed the opportunity to see the life she was deprived of unfold. We had a brief glimpse of the woman she was becoming, and I was so proud of her. I'm her father, and of course biased, but the world really was a better place with her in it. And definitely more fun. After the tragedy they experienced, Emily's parents divorced, but to this day, all anniversaries and birthdays are very hard for them. Easter is especially difficult because it was the last time the family spent time together. On May 6, 2011, Emily was still alive. A few hours before the tragedy, she communicated with her father on Facebook. She seemed normal, happy, without the slightest hint of fear. On May 7th, everything changed. The call woke up Emily's father. He didn't answer right away, but while fully waking up, he saw several missed calls from his ex-wife Caroline and many messages from her on his mobile phone. Messages from her were not unusual, but the number of calls and messages was alarming. Finally, he answered the incoming call. On the other end, his younger daughter Hannah was crying, and in the background, he heard his ex-wife screaming, "Emily is gone! Emily is gone!" Mark was sitting on the same couch where Emily had been sitting just a week ago, and he was devastated with grief. What was she planning to do after college? This couldn't be true. How could a girl so full of life now be dead? He couldn't remember anything else about that night. Emily's father didn't sleep until he got on the plane to England. He was still in shock and couldn't believe that the reason for his visit to his once beloved England was to identify the body of his beloved daughter, Emily. Mark still hoped that there had been some mistake. They took him straight to the morgue where Emily's body was. He stood in the room with Caroline, a police officer, and a morgue employee who pointed to the window and said that the body was in the next room. When they were ready, they could go in. The light came on. Mark and Caroline, shaking with horror, couldn't cross the threshold of that room. They were ready to scream that it wasn't their daughter, but it was her, their Emily. Mark recalls, "I wanted to run away and pretend I hadn't seen it, but I stood there holding her hand, looking at the face I had gazed at so intently when she was born. Only now, her eyes were closed, and I realized that this was not a joke. She wasn't going to sit up and shout boo. Emily, my daughter, was gone." The pain of losing someone close doesn't get easier. Time doesn't heal. It just teaches you to live with it. Everyone always noted and still talks about how beautiful Emily was. She had a wonderful, warm, and loving nature. She would come up to you, wrap you in her long arms, and hug you tightly. Emily wasn't perfect, but the world was undoubtedly a better place with her in it. After the tragedy, Mark remarried. He has a wonderful wife, Hillary, and a beautiful son, Hunter, growing up in their family. Emily's younger sister, Hannah, has graduated from university and built her own life, one where there is no place for domestic violence. Their greatest regret is that their Emily is not here to share the joyful moments with them. Years later, the void left by Emily's absence remains unfilled. The Longleys continue to honor her memory and cherish the precious time they had with her. They actively worked to raise awareness about the dangers of domestic violence and the importance of taking threats seriously. They hope that by sharing their story, they can prevent other families from experiencing the same heartbreak. Emily's legacy lives on through the lives she touched and the memories she created. Her infectious laughter, kind heart, and zest for life continue to inspire those who knew her. Though her time on Earth was tragically cut short, the impact she had will never be forgotten. As Mark reflects on his daughter's life, he takes solace in knowing that she lived each day to the fullest. Emily embraced every opportunity, pursued her dreams fearlessly, and loved wholeheartedly. While the pain of her loss will never fully subside, the Longleys find comfort in the knowledge that her spirit endures, forever woven into the fabric of their lives. In the end, Emily's story serves as a poignant reminder of the fragility of life and the devastating consequences of domestic violence. It is a call to action, urging society to take a stand against abuse in all its forms. By remembering Emily and sharing her story, we keep her light shining bright, ensuring that her legacy continues to make a difference in the world she left behind. Traditionally, thank you for watching, and remind you that it would be great if you support the video by liking and subscribing to the channel.